Son las... Ya me... Ahora sí me cambió el ritmo. Son las
It's
19
7 o'clock
horas del martes
on
19 de
Tuesday, the
mayo.
19th,
Estamos en el Palacio Nacional de
here in
México, en la
Mexico
Ciudad de
City, in
México,
National
y
Palace.
vamos a iniciar la
And let's
conferencia de
begin our
prensa
daily
diaria
conference
sobre la pandemia de
regarding the
COVID, enfermedad
COVID-19
causada por el nuevo
pandemic.
coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. Hoy, como acostumbramos más o menos
Just
los
like we
días
do
martes, les
on
voy a explicar
Tuesdays, we're
dos
going to focus
temas.
on two topics.
El informe técnico diario que
The
presentará el
daily
doctor
report that
José
will
Luis
be
Salomía, director
presented
general de
by
epidemiología,
Mr.
y el informe
Alvia,
de
and the mobility
movilidad que
report
presentará el doctor
presented by
Ricardo
Dr.
Cortés,
Cortez,
director general de
that
promoción de
is
la salud.
the General Director
Y
for
tenemos también
Health
un informe que solemos
Promotion.
presentar una
And
vez a la
once a
semana,
week,
que es el de afección del personal de salud.
we try to talk
Ha sido más
about
o menos la
the
misma
different
tendencia, pero
impacts
bueno, ya
that the
verán
healthcare
los
providers have
datos.
had, and we'll
Y
go into
luego
detail
preguntas y
as we go
respuestas.
along. And
Doctor,
then we're
por
going to do
favor.
a round for questions and
Muy
answers.
buenas tardes a todas y todos.
Good
Bienvenidos
afternoon to you
a la
all. Welcome
conferencia vespertina.
to this
Un saludo también a toda la
evening
población
report.
que nos escucha,
I would also like to
atiende no solamente a
salute
la
and greet
información, sino también a las
everyone who's
indicaciones
following
en
us,
este día
who
número
also are
58 de la
here
Jornada
on the
Nacional de
day number
Sana
58
Distancia.
of
Estamos en la
our
conferencia
Safe Distance
vespertina
campaign.
número 81.
This
Si
is
pasamos a la
our
siguiente diapositiva,
conference number
actualizamos
81.
los
If we
números
can
del
go
panorama
forward with our
internacional.
slide, we have
Realmente
updated our
no ha habido mucho
international
movimiento en los últimos días, prácticamente
framework,
un
and
cuarto
we haven't had
de
that
los
much
casos
movement
en la
on
pandemia
the
a nivel
last few
mundial
days,
son los que
only
siguen
just one-fourth of
manteniendo
this world
activa
pandemic that
a
we
la
have
misma, es decir, son los casos
had
confirmados
stable,
en estos últimos
which are the confirmed
14 días,
cases
y empieza a
in the
llamar un poco
past
la atención la
14
región
days.
del Mediterráneo Oriental, que es
Part
la
of
que ha
the
tenido un
Western
incremento, había estado
Mediterranean
en
has
media
been
del
giving
10,
attention
11.8, lo
as
cual habla
it has
también de que
had an
está habiendo
increase up to
actividad de
11.8%,
propagación,
which
transmisión
also shows
en
that
esta
there is
región
activity in
del
terms of
mundo.
transmission and
Las
dissemination
Américas
in
se
that
han
particular
mantenido
part of the world.
prácticamente
Within
en
the
una
Americas, it has been
proporción
kept
de esos
in
casos en los
proportion
últimos 14 días similar, ha
cumulative
estado
to the
variando entre
similar
un
cases in the number,
48
and
y
it
un
has been ranging
52% casi
from
ya en las
48 to
últimas
52%
semanas,
for the
¿verdad?
past
Siguiendo
few
la
weeks.
siguiente diapositiva, actualizamos para el día
If we go
de hoy las
forward,
estadísticas
you can
nacionales.
see our
Son
statistics for today at
más
a
de
national level.
185,000
We
las
do have
personas que han
above
sido ingresadas a protocolo de estudio, es decir, que
185,775
presentaban una
people who
infección
have been submitted for
respiratoria
testing
aguda,
that
algunas
will
leves, algunas
presenting an
graves,
acute
fueron
breathing
ingresadas a protocolo de estudio, y
disease, and they
precisamente
were
de
enter
este
into
grupo
our
de
testing protocol.
personas en las cuales
And
se
out
obtuvo
of this group of
una
people
muestra, un hisopo
from which
faríngeo, un
we
hisopo
got
nasofaríngeo, para
testing
realizar la prueba
through
de
the
reacción en cadena de la
Q-tip
polimerasa, que
that
es
we
la prueba
use so
confirmatoria
that
para
we can confirm
SARS-CoV-2, y con la cual
the presence of
confirmamos y
COVID-19,
descartamos un caso
and through
de
which we
COVID-19.
either confirm
Fueron
that test is positive or negative.
54.346
We
las personas
got
que hasta el momento, desde que inició la epidemia en México, se han
54,346 that
confirmado
from the moment
a
it
esta
began
prueba,
up to
pero
right
así
now
también
have been submitted to the test.
101.979 salieron
And as
negativas
well,
a
we
la
had
misma.
also had
Dentro del grupo de casos
101,979
confirmados,
testing
tenemos
negative
a los casos
for this
confirmados
group.
activos. Estos
We also have active cases,
11.767, que también es un poco menos de un cuarto de todos
which
los
is
casos
on
que se han confirmado hasta el momento, y que
11,767, which is
representan
a
en
little bit
términos
less than
prácticos
what we had
la
before.
epidemia
And for
activa
practical
en
purposes,
México, que
they
todavía
represent the active
continúa
pandemics in the country
movilizando.
that still
Así también
continues
son
to scale.
5.666
We have also
las
had
defunciones ocurridas
5,666
y que han sido
diseases
confirmadas también por laboratorio a través de un
passings
resultado
that
positivo
have been
a SARS-CoV-2.
tested
En la
in
siguiente
laboratory
diapositiva
for
vemos la
COVID-19.
distribución de la carga
In the
acumulada.
next
Estos
slide, you will see the distribution for the
54.346
cumulative charge.
todavía siguen siendo
You
tres
can see the
las
number
entidades
on the
federativas que
screen.
han rebasado
We still
la
continue
máxima
to have
escala, que son
3
esos 3,000 casos, ya los veníamos
that
diciendo
are
en días
above
previos:
the
la
line that
Ciudad de
we have
México, la Ciudad de
scheduled,
México
and
y
it's been
Baja
over for
California,
State of
y
Mexico,
el
Mexico City, Baja
65% de
California,
las
and
entidades federativas
65% of
tienen
the federal
más de
entities,
500 casos
they have
confirmados.
had
Es un número
above
que todavía se ha
500
mantenido también
positive
en los
cases,
últimos días,
which is a number that we
42.5
have
la,
held on
la
to for the
cantidad de
past few
casos
days.
por 100,000 habitantes. Eso es lo que vamos hasta el
46,
momento.
sorry,
En la siguiente diapositiva,
42.5
solo una distribución de manera
numbers each
descendente. Pueden ubicar ustedes a los 6
100,000
estados que
inhabitants.
comentábamos, que han
In the following
superado
state, in the following
esa
chart,
cifra
you
de
can
los 3,000
see
casos acumulados.
the
Y
different
bueno,
cases
pueden
along the
identificar a
different
todos los
states, and
demás
you can
en
see
este
the
mismo
cumulative
cuadrante.
cases
En
in the
la
same
siguiente diapositiva
color and
veremos ahora
difference
la
of
carga
range. In the next slide, you will see the number of active cases, the most recent pandemic in Mexico that's still active. That's 767 as in prior days. That we will continue to see increasing the colors of red across this map. That will indicate they do have above 500 cumulative cases in the past 14 days, and this will definitely represent which are those entities that, depending on the color that they have been assigned, are actually confirming the cases throughout this time that actually confirm active cases. On the next chart, you can also see the descending order of the cases, with Mexico City at the forefront and followed by the state of Mexico for the past 14 days. But in my next slide, you're going to see the cumulative number, which is 9.2 in terms of cumulative rate at a national level. This is distributed through the different states, and right now we only have two that have the largest incidence, which is above 20 per every 100,000 citizens, which are the darkest colors, which are Tabasco and Mexico City, although some other states begin to change their color towards a darker green, which is only a representation of an increase of the cases, and hence they can be included of the active pandemics at national level. Then on this chart, you can see on this array how it's in descending order, so that you can also identify the different entities that are facing these cumulative cases. Mexico City heading the chart, and then Tabasco, and those are at the first two highest number difference to our comparative rates. On my next slide, you can see the distribution for the confirmed fatality rates, which are in blue, and these are based on the date when it happened. And we also have pending laboratory testings to be released from this fatality rate. You can see that those have been concentrated in the past few days. And we have also explained that this phenomenon is brought about due to the time from they began to have some symptoms, demand medical attention, and then also confirm after their passing to establish the reasons for passing. And that's why we have them so concentrated in the past few days. I will also like to confirm that this laboratory will give us the final confirmation based on the result that we have in the platform, and hence we can continue to follow up how the fatality rate continues to behave in Mexico. In my next slide, you can see the distribution through the states. Those gaps in yellow or light orange that you get to see on the screen are an indication that those could still continue to increase in terms of the fatality rate for each single state that you have seen in the chart. On the next chart, you can see the pandemic curve. The red one and the yellow one are the pending confirmation cases that we have, and we are experiencing the same phenomenon. They are cumulative in the past few days due to the process that I just explained. Something that I would like to highlight is that more than half of these cases in yellow are cases that are developed in Mexico City and the state of Mexico. These two entities are concentrating more than half of the total cases that we have, because in the last few days is where we have had the highest concentration on. And based on our forecast that we have already shared with you, we are actually following those expected peaks for transmission and an increase on confirmed cases. On the next slide, you can see the cumulative rate for this, which is for 54,346. This is something that has been developed over the past 24 hours, which is 2,713 cases that have been confirmed. And on the lower part of the chart in orange, you can see that in the past 24 hours is the highest peak that we have had so far. This is also explained that, aside from the fact that these two states are the highest ones on the chart, let us be reminded that there are other states that are also increasing or are about to hit their highest peak of this pandemic, and hence we do expect a large number of confirmed cases in the following days. In my next slide, we're going to go over the bed availability and hospital availability. Out of the 23,213 available beds for IRAG that were prepared under this program, we were reported yesterday at midnight that 9,069 are occupied out of the first number in blue. Hence, our occupancy rate increased 39%, and how it has been increasing in the past few days. The report also tells us that there are 14,144 available beds right now, which would be the difference out of that 59%. I'm sorry, 61% still available. So 96% is our data right now, which is the number of units that have had notified that they are either available or occupied. And with this 96%, we can confirm that we do have enough information that is being gathered from these numbers. On the next slide, I'm going to show you this 39% distributed at a national level. You can see how Mexico City has had an important occupancy increase by 74%, followed by the state of Mexico on 61%, Guerrero with 59%, Baja California with 55% still, regardless of it being decreasing. It would usually be at second or third level of occupancy, but now these states have, as I mentioned before, not only in my slides, but in previous conferences, that this is where we have an intensity of increasing cases, and hence we can see that here. On my next slide, we're going to focus on critical beds, which are the ICU beds for those who are in need of a ventilator. And we can see that at national level, there is a 32% occupancy and an availability of 68%. That's slightly above half of all of the states having available beds. And this will make it so that the same institutions will be able to have personnel and equipment, just as the ventilators that, at a given time, they may be moved to the different states where they are needed, such as Mexico City, Baja California, and Mexico State, so that we can continue to reconvert and to refit our hospital availability, so that we can always guarantee that there is a space available for those in need of this technology.
Muchas gracias, doctora Lumía. Doctor Ricardo
Thank you,
Cortés,
Doctora Lumía. Doctor
Director Nacional de
Cortés,
Salud, por favor.
Muchas gracias,
please.
doctor López Gatell. En esta ocasión, muy buenas
Thank you,
tardes,
doctor.
tengan todas y
Good evening
todos
to you all.
aquí en Palacio Nacional y en sus casas.
We're here
En esta ocasión,
in the National
la-
Palace,
el
and you are
informe de
at your
movilidad
house.
tiene un
And
cambio de
here, my
perspectiva.
mobility report has a change in
Es
perspective.
importante mencionar que
I find it
los estados de
important
la República
to mention
mantienen
that all the
una
states
disminución de
have
la
been
movilidad
having a decrease
bastante
in
importante,
mobility,
como ya lo hemos visto
significant,
en semanas
a
pasadas.
significant one, as we have seen in the past few weeks.
Todavía por encima de
Some
la
of them
meta,
are
que es la
slightly
disminución del
above our goal,
65%.
which is to achieve
Algunos
65
por
mobility
debajo,
reduction.
todavía mejor que la
Some of
meta,
them are
como el
slightly
caso
even
de
better than the
Quintana Roo,
goal,
que
just
ha
like Quintana
tenido
Roo.
movilidades de menos
They have had
del
mobility
85%.
ranging
Pero
below
nos pareció importante
85%.
un análisis que nos hizo
But
el
we
favor de
found
presentar y de
significant
compartir
to
el
present to
CONACYT,
you a report that was
en
given
donde lo
to
que
us by
estamos viendo
CONACYT,
es la
in
movilidad
which we can
de los
see
últimos 15 días
mobility
dividido en dos
for the
periodos.
past
El
15
promedio de
days
la movilidad
divided in two.
de hace
One
2
criterion
semanas,
being the
¿sí?
mobility for the
versus
past 2 weeks
el promedio de la movilidad de la
versus
semana
the
pasada.
rate of
¿Y
the
cuál ha sido el
mobility
cambio?
of
Y
next
nos
week
parece
and what has
importante
changed.
porque lo que
And
podemos
we find that
observar en la
important because what we can see
gráfica
in
es
this
cómo
chart
el estado de Aguascalientes,
is
a pesar de
how
tener un gran
Aguascalientes,
esfuerzo en
even
disminuir su
though they
movilidad,
have
de una
had a
semana a
huge
otra
effort in
incrementó su movilidad
reducing
un
their mobility, from one week to another, it increased by 11%, almost 12%.
Se movió de
That means that they
40
went
de menos
from
40 a menos 30.
minus 40 to
Esa
minus
diferencia
30.
lo que puede significar en términos de la epidemia
That
local
difference,
en
what it would
Aguascalientes,
be
es un
translated in
incremento
terms of
en el
the
número de
situation of
casos,
the
en la
pandemic,
actividad viral.
is an
En el
increase
futuro
on the
cercano,
viral activity
sabemos
and,
que
and
el
unconfirmed
periodo de
cases in the
incubación
near future.
es
We
hasta de
are aware
14
that the
días,
incubation
entonces
period can
la
take as long as
consecuencia
14 days.
de que
Hence,
algunos
the consequence of
ciudadanos
some
hayan
of the
decidido
citizens
movilizarse por cualquiera de las razones
have been
que ésta sea,
moving
puede
for
tener
any given
consecuencias
reason, it
en
might have a
el
consequence
incremento del número de casos.
when it comes to
Hemos
increasing the
puesto
number
esta
of
línea
confirmed cases.
roja en el
We have set
3%,
this red
pensando
line
que el 3% de las
at level
personas
of
pudieran
3%, thinking
moverse
that
para hacer
3% of
algunas
the
compras,
population may be needing to
para
mobilize themselves to either
movilizarse al
get grocery
súper, a
shopping
movilizarse al
or to
mercado,
move themselves to
movilizarse
the
a la
supermarket or to
farmacia.
their local markets or to
Pero a
the
partir de un
drugstores.
3% extra lo hemos
But
también
starting
definido
on
como
an
un
additional
punto
3%, we
de
have
análisis
decided to
específico
establish
para
it
que
as
cada
the
entidad
analytics
federativa, que
point
cada estado,
so
que
that
cada
each
ciudadano que
state
ha
and each
decidido moverse
citizen
por
that
causas que
has
no fueran
chosen to move
esenciales lo
for
piense
non-essential
y
reasons
pueda mejor
will never
buscar
consider it
una
again,
alternativa a
and
la
they just look
actividad que quería hacer
an
y a la que
alternative
se
to whatever he or she was
definió
doing
como
or
una
whatever he or
movilidad.
she was
Entonces, Baja
choosing to
California
go out for.
Sur también se movió,
Baja
incrementó casi
California Sur,
9% su
they
movilidad,
also moved
al igual
and they
que
increased
Colima,
99%
Michoacán, Baja
in their mobility, just
California,
like Colima,
Durango,
Michoacán,
Morelos, Sonora,
Durango,
Hidalgo,
Morelos, Sonora,
Chihuahua,
Hidalgo,
Yucatán, Nuevo
Chihuahua,
León,
Yucatán,
Tabasco
Nuevo
y
León,
Campeche
Tabasco, and
fueron
Campeche.
aquellos estados cuya movilidad se
All
incrementó
of the
en más
aforementioned
de
increased their
3% con
mobility
respecto de una
over
semana
3%
que
from one
pasó
week to
hace
another.
15 días versus la semana anterior.
This week being the week for the
El
past
resto
15 days
de
versus the
estados, por ejemplo, de San
calendar
Luis
last
Potosí
week.
hacia la
In the
derecha de su
case of San Luis
pantalla hasta
Potosí, if you
llegar
can see
a
at the right of
Jalisco y
your
Ciudad de
screen,
México, que
all the way
prácticamente
to
no se
Jalisco and
movieron
Mexico
en nada
City,
de
in
una
which
semana a
basically we
otra,
did not
y
move
particularmente
from one week
Querétaro,
to another,
Zacatecas, Tlaxcala,
and
Puebla y
Querétaro,
Nayarit
Zacatecas, Tlaxcala,
todavía
Puebla, and Nayarit,
disminuyeron aún más
they are
su movilidad
reducing
de
their
una
mobility
semana
even
a otra,
more
lo cual
from one week to
también
another,
es,
which I find
hay que agradecer a la población de
significant,
estos
and we
estados
thank you,
y
and we
es un
thank the population
agradecimiento
of
en
those
general
states.
a toda la
This
población,
is
a
a
toda la
big
sociedad
thank you
mexicana,
and a big
pero
general thank you for
quien
all
se
the
ve
Mexicans,
reflejado
to all the
en
Mexican
estos
society,
incrementos y que
but
no haya
whoever
sido
is
por alguna
reflected in
actividad
those increases,
esencial,
and that
por favor,
particular mobility on
como
your end
hemos
was not
dicho
due to
en repetidas
an
ocasiones,
essential
quédate en
reason.
casa. Muchas
Please,
gracias.
just as we have repeated it for the past few weeks, stay at
Gracias,
home.
estimado doctor Cortés.
Thank you, Dr. Cortés.
Ya no presentaste lo de médicos, ¿eh? Le pido al doctor Alomía si presenta lo de personal de salud también.
Claro que
And
sí,
now
con
I
mucho
want
gusto.
to give the floor to Dr.
Actualizamos
Alomía
entonces
again.
las cifras para esta semana del
We
personal de
updated
salud
our
que
numbers
también ha
for
sido
this week
afectado
for the
por esta epidemia
medical
de COVID.
personnel who have
Recordando que
also been affected
personal de
by
salud,
this
pues bueno, es el
pandemic.
que está precisamente en la primera línea
Medical
de
staff
atención
are
a
our
las personas
frontline
que en su momento llegan
workers
demandando
for
la
this
misma.
particular pandemic
Igual que en
in order to serve
presentaciones
people in
anteriores en
need.
base al panorama, están
Just like we did in
clasificados
prior
este grupo de
conferences,
personas en
let me
tres
show you the
grupos:
overview,
positivos,
and we have
sospechosos y
classified them
aquellos que también ya han
in
dado
three groups:
negativos a la prueba.
negative, positive, and the ones that are pending
11.394
on
es el
the
número
results from
de
testing.
personal de salud. Ahorita vamos a ver cómo se distribuyen
You
en
can see
relación
our full
a la
number
profesión o
and how they
ocupación
are
que han dado
distributed in terms
positivos, se han
of the
confirmado
occupancy
para
rate and that
COVID-19,
have been
pero así
confirmed for
también
COVID-19. That's
29.634 han dado
11,394.
negativos a la prueba.
But we also have
Tenemos
had
todavía un grupo de
29,634 testing
8.275
negative.
que tienen
And we
la
still have a
clasificación
group
de
of
sospechosos y donde todavía
8,275
podríamos encontrar
under the
lógicamente
pending
más personal
category, in which
de
we could
salud
also find
afectado.
either
Así
more
también esta
positive cases
distribución la pueden ustedes
within our
visualizar
personnel.
en cada una de
These
las
can be
entidades
depicted
federativas donde
in the
este
different states
recurso humano
on the
labora,
chart
¿no? Vemos
where they
lógicamente Ciudad de
are
México
working.
y Estado de México
Definitely
son
Mexico
las
City
dos
and
entidades que
Estado de
concentran
Mexico are the two
la
states
mayor
that
cantidad,
are
más
gathering
allá
the
de las
largest
barras
group
totales, porque
of
recordemos que las
doctors.
barras totales incluyen los tres
Please
grupos,
remember
pero si
that the
nos
total bars
concentramos
are
justo
including the three
en el
groups,
color rojo
but if we only
oscuro,
focus on the
así
red
mundo,
color, the dark red
podemos ver
color,
que también son las
you can appreciate that they are as well the two states that hold the larger number on positive cases. On my next slide, you can see the pandemic curve, similar to the ones that I presented for national cases, but this is a curve that has only been built on the numbers for healthcare personnel that have been affected. And we can definitely see a similar profile than the one we had from my prior presentation, since we can see that the pending cases are still concentrated in the past few days. This is a recent number, and that's part of our active pandemic that we're experiencing in the country. And in my following slides, you can also see this particular situation. Here, you can see the active cases within the healthcare personnel that have been sick for the past 14 days. It's a fourth out of our total for those who have been working since the pandemic began, and they represent 2,790 positive cases who have developed symptoms in the past 14 days. And you can see them distributed as well, again, with Mexico City and Estado de Mexico heading the chart by concentrating the larger number of this particular situation. And you can see the full numbers for the different states along the chart. On my next slide, you can see the number of cumulative cases that are confirmed, and we're back again to 11,394 total cases and how they are distributed in group age and at a given time by gender. You can see here the largest impact based on the number of confirmed cases, based on the number that we have with this personnel. They are ranging between 30 and 44 years old, and then it lowers down as we go lower in the age group. And of course, we do have less in the larger, we have less cases in older groups. You can see the distribution out of these 11,394 groups by the time in which they were diagnosed and what was their clinical state at the time. And we can see that the percentage are above our national level even. You can see how 89% actually had symptoms on and off, but we also had a group that went to the hospital. 4.7 were interned into the hospital, and 5.1 were considered critical cases, and less than 1% had to have a ventilator and entering into the ICU. These percentage are a lot lower that we have seen at a national level when it comes to testing and evaluating all of the people who have been sick. On my next slide, I can show the cumulative cases per hospital institution regarding the report that we gathered. Let me bring up a particular phenomenon that may be happening. This is the institution that at a given point tested, confirmed, and classified the subjects, and then at a later time confirmed the case. Now, this no longer represents that this particular healthcare worker might have even gotten sick at that particular institution. Please remember that healthcare workers are taking shifts and they rotate throughout different institutions. Plus, they also work at a private level, and they are also given the chance to acquire the virus through their regular lives and through regular transmission devices. So this is something that is allowing the institution that actually detected, studied, and notified and confirmed the case of that particular health worker. And you can see the numbers on the screen so that you can have them. And whenever you wish to analyze them, you can, so that we can have the institution when we got the notification. Here, what you can see is the distribution of our healthcare workers based on their job. We can see that the largest number, 41% of it, can be assigned to nurses, Then right next, 36% are doctors that were transmitted, and then a larger group with different healthcare providers in a different range of jobs, we have 20%. And if we go deeper, we can see personnel from laboratories at 2% and dental workers at 1%, which are the less affected community. On this slide, you can see the confirmed cases. Out of those 11,394 who have been tested positive, you can see the relationship based on their obesity state. You can see that it's not as high as we have had on those who have unfortunately passed away, which confirms that there is a relationship between these conditions, that for those who have presented complications are at a given risk group. You can see that obesity is at 19%, hypertension 12.6, and diabetes at 7.9. I will show the ratio on it on the people who passed away later on. And here it is. This is our healthcare workers that unfortunately passed away collateral result of this disease. They are distributed by states. Our full total is 149. And here is the information by states so that you can identify where they were working at the time of their passing while they were treating patients and where they unfortunately passed away. Let me show you my next slide. Here you can see the range grouped by age and by gender. This is only the passing away. And you can see a very homogeneous distribution, just like as the confirmed case slide. There is no particular predisposition to any given group as such. In my next chart, you can see the performance that we're doing based on their job. And here you can see 82% of the doctors, particularly in that particular assignment. Different from my prior slide, you can see that the largest number was gathered in nurses, but in this particular slide is doctors. And the ones who actually eventually pass away, it's really this next group. And nurses, they do decrease to 24%. And just other general healthcare providers increase to 38%. Let me show you on this next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I had another one. Would I have the morbidity rate? Because when we go deep into those numbers of 19 and so forth, they might increase just like they did for the general population. In the case of people with hypertension and obesity, you are even reaching numbers about 40 or 50%, and you can see how this particular scenario is a risk for the general population and for certain specialized groups, just like the healthcare workers are.
Gracias, doctor. Gracias, doctora Lumía. Pues vamos
Thank you,
a
doctor.
preguntas y respuestas. Bianca Aguirre, de Notimex. Usted, colega. Usted, Araceli. Usted.
Good evening. Thank you. I'm from Notimex TV. Deputy Secretary, the Health Secretary, Jorge Alcorcer, we saw that just a little while ago was talking about remdesivir and clinical trials, and he was talking about how this has been used in Mexico. And we saw that there was a positive effect, and then from people who had been using remdesivir. And then we also saw that Mr. Ebrard was talking about this as well. So, Deputy Secretary, what is the number of people who have benefited from this, and has remdesivir turned out to be effective? And are we going to be able to get this medication, because it is not cheap? I also want to ask you, we have Mexicans Against Corruption, and they have reported that there was a database of registry, and they said that there was a representative sample, and it was saying that the people who had died during this period that we've been looking could be triple what you have said. On your first question, in terms of drugs that are still in an experimental stage in terms of being proven, Dr. Cortez, would you be so kind as to identify on the coronavirus.gov.mx website and see our specific guide there that we have, which is about the use of medications that are in an experimental phase in terms of being proven to work or not. We don't have proven efficacy for these drugs, and remdesivir is one of those. It is promising, possibly. It could be. The health minister mentioned that. There are some preliminary results from the clinical trials, but they really have been of trials of very few people. Very few people have been tested with this. So there are clinical trials going on. But the first thing is we have to make sure that they're efficient, that they're effective, and that they're safe for people. So people need to understand that these experiments are not, these are not taken lightly. There are very strict rules, there are very strict biosecurity regulations, ethical regulations. And at our research, our clinical research institutions, we have the highest standards, just the very same as international standards, with these subjects in mind, clinical trials and testing. If there is a clinical trial that is promising, then we start a cycle to see where we're going to go with this. First, we start laboratory testing and we see if it has been shown to have the possibility to, for example, in this situation, to reduce the virus's impact. But first, there are going to be very small clinical trials, then there's going to be testing on animals, and then there is testing on people, usually very, very small groups of 10 to 15 people. We call this phase 1, and this is to make sure that these drugs are safe. Then we go on to testing dozens of people, and we see if it's safe, and we see if there is efficacy. And we've talked about this on other occasions. We have to see that it is useful, that this medication in this case, in this situation, would reduce the recovery time or would reduce the unfavorable effects of this disease. If they do pass the test, then we start doing larger clinical trials. Remdesivir, which is quite promising, and especially within the context of this pandemic, it excites all of us very much, but we still have very preliminary, modest results. It's totally legitimate for people, for example, people in Mexico, in the whole world, to be very excited and very hopeful that there would be a medicine, a medication that would be available for their family members to take. That's totally legitimate. But let me tell you how important it is for people to understand how these types of research opportunities, research projects get developed. People have to understand how important this is. This has not been approved for general use, not in Mexico, not in any part of the world, not in any other part of the world. So please, we don't want false hope. We don't want people thinking that soon people are just going to have to get remdesivir and everything will be okay. Because I have to comment to you that it wouldn't be unusual to have different types of people trying to acquire this medication and buy it directly, or health suppliers might be trying to buy it directly. And then we're going to see that someone's going to want to start selling and take advantage in that manner. So please, May 19th, 2020, this medication remdesivir is not approved for general use. What it is authorized for is to be in clinical trials, to be used in clinical trials, as long as it is hitting and fulfilling those highest qualities of biosecurity and ethics. Could you give us could you make a comment about that guide right now? Yes, absolutely, doctor. This is our website. This is our information portal, www.coronavirus.gov.mx. You can see we have a number of menus at the top. You can see for the general public, you can go in. If you're a person with a disability, you have another tab. There are a number of tabs right up there. You can see here that remdesivir is commented on here as being not approved yet. This is a guideline, and this is for healthcare professionals. That's why we're on the menu for healthcare professionals right now. You would want to look under the healthcare professionals tab and then click on the documents. These are the documents that we have for healthcare professionals. You can, everyone who's at home right now, I want to tell you, you can check this out at any time. You can consult these documents at any time. We have medication use. We have how to fill out death certificates correctly. We have how to wash your hands correctly in order to attend patients. And we also have our guide for protecting healthcare professionals and people with disabilities within our COVID-19 framework. We also have documents that can be consulted for the general public, and that is right. You would access those right on the top menus right there. You would decide which subject you want to take a look at, and there it is. So here's your reference point. Here's your framework. Anyone who wants to take a look at this, whether you're media professionals, healthcare professionals, we have this guide here for you, and we want to be very clear about what the limits for use are. These are situations where, with the support of a very rigorous protocol and rigorous validated methods, that this drug remdesivir could be used under very specific situations and conditions. So I'm very excited, and so is the secretary, because this is promising, but today it is not for generalized use. It has not been approved. I will update you. I don't have that information right now. The first ones are the ones that Dr. Alcocer mentioned. There were 7 people who participated. This was at the National Nutrition Institute. And then Dr. Gustavo Reyes Terran, who coordinates these institutes, he was at the spearhead of this. He was, Dr. Antonio Fauci, as you know, also announced a clinical trial that had been going on in the United States. Mexicans against corruption. Yes, that organization, well, I mean, this is a subject that we have raked over again and again. I think that we have different levels of being updated on what's going on, and we have some information that comes out, and then other people have information, and then everyone is bringing out their own information. I have explained that many times what happens is that people have a reduced understanding of the epidemiological monitoring, but I have explained to you how the epidemiological monitoring is based on clinical information, and how it's also based on confirmed cases and suspected cases, how we take a look at occupancy rates in phase 3. We've said this for many weeks, and let's not lose sight of our goal. It's to save people's lives. It's to protect lives. It's to protect people's health, especially people who are at a higher risk of getting COVID. Now, in terms of keeping track of fatality rates, this is very important. This is very important when we're evaluating a pandemic, but it's not something that we can take a look at in real time, or that contributes, that information does not contribute to how people are attended or admitted to hospitals. It doesn't have really a great weight on epidemiological monitoring. We're more concerned about hospitals, their occupancy rates, how many beds are available, the massive mitigation measures measures, we're more concerned with that than the fatality rate. Mexico, just the same as in the US, in Canada, and the United Kingdom, and in other European countries, we are following different protocols to see what the impact of this pandemic is, as well as what is the impact of other elements, other health elements that are coming into play right now. And well, all of those have an impact on the fatality rate. This information is collected at a slower speed. As we have explained, in Mexico, we have a number of mechanisms that are based on exactly on death certificates. The death certificate is the document where healthcare professionals document what the cause of death was. Since April 13th, we have a technical guide, which is also on the information portal. And there it specifies that death certificates for people who have the clinical manifestations of COVID will be registered there. If there wasn't a chance to take a sample of that dead person at that point, they have to be certified on the death certificate as probably having died of COVID. Then we can do an analysis and identify where this person does or does not fit into a fatality rate number. So it seems like the news is a bit repetitive. I think national and international media have focused on this. One thing that has called my attention there from the results of that analysis is that they aren't taking into account that that number from death certificates, I don't know if they're getting this information licitly or illicitly, but the most probable thing is that these are cases that we do have confirmed, but we haven't registered them on the fatality rate index. So we are still waiting for lab results. So what's the most probable thing that happened there is that they've already been registered as a confirmed case, or for example, they're one of the 5,000, almost 6,000 cases that we've had up to the cutoff date yesterday. So, I mean, this information keeps cropping up. I think we'll probably comment on that later. Thank you, Bianca. You, Araceli, and then you. It's 7:42. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to your team. Doctor, what was missing? So what was missing for the 22 of your governors to open up their municipalities of hope? Why do you think they did not open up their municipalities, their states? What do you think? What do the people who collaborate with you think? How did that decision get made by those governors? Your question is right on point. Today, besides the weekly meeting that we have with the state health ministers, we also had another meeting virtually, and we had that meeting with the governors and Madame Governor from Sonora. All of them were talking about the new normal, as this includes the hope, the municipalities of hope, and also it also includes talking about the construction sectors, the automobile manufacturing sectors, and mining. So we called the governors together, the governors where there is activity with regard to automobile manufacturing. We wanted to get them together. We had the Minister of the Interior who appealed for all of these people to come together. Mr. Cordero, also Dr. Alcocer was in on that meeting. And we also had the General Director of the Mexican National Health System there as well. And here's what they said. They talked about their personal reasons in each state for why they did want to open or why they wanted to be more cautious, especially with regard to the municipalities of hope. And I'd like to repeat something here because I think it's worth repeating. There are two different stances here, two different positions. Just because people are on two different sides doesn't mean that they're clashing. the health law is very clear when it talks about concurrence, when we have two people who come together for a same goal. And these two sides are the federal health authorities, for example, the Council for General Health and Well-being, the Ministry of Health, and the President. And then we have the 32 states that are responsible within their own states. Now, when these two sides get together, they complement each other. Why? Because the governors recognize what is going on in their area a lot better than people who are at a federal level. So it's very helpful for municipal level authorities to speak with federal authorities and to share information. This dialogue is very positive because it helps us make decisions that hit the bullseye right in the middle. Now, our National Safe Distancing Campaign, please remember we have 12 more days of this. It's ending on June 1st. And what they were talking about in this meeting was that for the municipalities of Hope, perhaps they would be removed from the National Safe Distancing Campaign. Well, I'm not saying that they would be below everyone else. I'm not being pejorative. But the state health authority can make its own decisions, and it has the authority and the power to do so. But it's important to take a look too at those mobility patterns federally, but then those people who are at the governor level, they have an even closer understanding of what's going on in their state. Some of them, for example, they let us know that the municipal governments were not ready to open up their economies again. And like the president has said many times, nothing by force, everything with reason. The majority of them, here's what they said. They said, I'd rather not do this right now. Let's do this on June 1st. Thank you. Araceli, Canal 11. Thank you, Deputy Secretary. I'd like to ask you if there are more clinical trials besides the one that is focused on remdesivir that are going on. Are there? And also, could you go into detail about how long these clinical trials take? How long before we can determine if remdesivir can be used? And if you would be so kind. The deaths that have happened very unfortunately among healthcare professionals, of those deaths, how many of their family members or children or parents of these people, how many of them have asked for the health insurance that was announced last week by the federal government? I'm sorry, unfortunately, not even one person has asked for that yet, has applied for it yet. Our healthcare professionals who died before this federal benefit for life insurance was prepared. This was prepared by the Mexican National Insurance Company. And we're hoping that this can be expedited through bureaucracy to help people get that life insurance for our professional healthcare workers, but no one has applied for that yet. About the clinical trials and what other clinical trials there are, I do need to update that information for you, especially with regard to the national healthcare system, as well as the other healthcare institutions that participate in this. There were some other tests, like for hydroxychloroquine. I can't remember the other one. Oh, acetrolysine. Atrolysine, chloroquine. And then we have that L6 one as well. These are the products that were available. And then we have nervectin, which was also mentioned by media recently. And this was spoken about as a promising product. We have to focus on what stages every single one of these drugs are in. These are just being taken a look at in laboratories. These are antiparasitic medications that are common. They've already been used in a restricted fashion among humans, but within the veterinary community, it's used quite often. But we are so far from having any of these turn into being a promising product. Don't think that tomorrow we're going to be using this product. We really have to work on checking out these drugs that have already been registered for other uses because they're right on hand. So maybe you don't need to buy that because we already have it. These products have high levels of toxicity and they have serious secondary side effects. How long have they been doing research on this? Let me take advantage of this moment to tell you that I want to update you on what's going on with vaccinations. We do have some promising candidates for vaccinations. They're all just at the very dawning of their possible use. We still are not expecting those to be able to be used quickly. How long will it be? This depends on a number of factors, including how quickly we can identify people who are candidates to participate in clinical trials according to certain characteristics, and how these different studies, for example, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of these clinical trials, above all else, we have to highlight safety always. And we have very demanding selection criteria for participating in these clinical trials. People need to have very, very low risk, or people who are at a very critical point, and any sort of small hope that this will work is why they're going to participate in those clinical trials. So the times really vary quite a bit. But the clinical trial for remdesivir that had researchers that were Mexican as well participating, that lasted 3 months. From when Mexico said that they wanted to participate up to the moment of participating, and then when we got results that were made public. Thank you. Who's next? You or you? You, right? That's what we said. Good afternoon, Juan Hernandez. I'm here from Grupo Canton. I know we were going to talk again about these governors who don't want to reopen their states at this point, even though they have municipalities of hearts. But we talked to the Ministry of Secretary of Public Education, and they said, wouldn't it be better that you as health authorities would say when children could go back to school, just so that we could avoid this whole yes, no game? And a second question that has to do with my first question as well, is there a risk that these green municipalities could turn into sanctuaries or for people who are sick of the lack of mobility, and then they go to these areas and they start going to coffee shops or bars, I don't know, whatever? Wouldn't that be contradictory? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let me answer your second question. It's a worry. It's a legitimate worry, especially in terms of local dynamics, because there could be people who are traveling, even temporary, to these municipalities of hope or ones that are surrounding them. And yes, they could sort of become sanctuaries with low transmission rates. One thing I want to be very clear about is that no municipality in Mexico or the world is free from the risk of becoming a red focus point of contagion. In terms of the municipalities of hope, we haven't identified that people would be rushing to these areas because they aren't tourist areas, they don't have infrastructure. They're mostly hard to get to communities, rural communities. So what could happen maybe is that people's family members could start to gather there. That's an option. But one of our challenges here, and this was also mentioned by our governors and by Madame Governor of Sonora, the challenge is how do we manage to diminish, to reduce this physical movement of people among municipalities with low transmission rates going to municipalities with no transmission rate without crunching on, stepping on their constitutional rights? Because the Constitution is still in place. We are not suspending anything in the Constitution at any moment. So right now we have an effort from people people are making this effort to rise to this challenge and say, please, even though you have supply chains that are moving to these rural areas, but we normally at these places have a municipal head where we have, for example, the Sunday farmers market, where people are selling their locally produced items. That could cause mobility to be focused on those points, and that is pretty serious. We hope there won't be unusual migration to these areas, but we're keeping an eye on all of that. Education. This education point, quite interesting. Yesterday, I had an interesting technical conversation with the Secretary of Public Education, Mr. Moctezuma Barragan. And from a health perspective and from the very start, he has been one of the most committed people. I don't want to put down or diminish the excellent participation of other health ministers, but he has really been an active participant in the National Safe Distancing campaign. Now, what we reflected on there, we had a technical reflection. This school issue is much more complex than what it looks. I don't want to upset anyone, but the problem is that the pandemic could spread so quickly within schools. For example, in the states of Nuevo León and Jalisco, who are just starting to get up on that pandemic curve and who are intensely reducing their mobility, we are not saying they're going to avoid the pandemic. They're going to get hit with the pandemic, but later. And so when they're coming out of the pandemic, it's probably going to be in like June or July, maybe August. Not just those two states, numerous states. So at any given time, there could be a change, a very big change. For example, the metropolitan area could stretch out to the end of September in terms of transmission rates, for example, in the state of Monterrey. The challenge is, do we open schools again? When? Do we follow the state who has liberated itself of the pandemic? Or how do we do that? So we're taking a look at a number of different frameworks. We really don't have anything as a done deal yet. It's the same situation in Mexico and in the whole world. Let's be very clear to Mexicans about that, to everyone in Mexico. Maybe we're going to be taking some non-conventional approaches to how we're going to deal with this, to how we're going to deal with administration in schools and how we're going to lower risks for people getting infected. Oh, yes, at any time. We have an open and flowing conversation. If you have a specific question for him, welcome. You. I think you will be the last question. We have 2 minutes. Good afternoon, Arturo Contreras from Pie de Página. The United States is starting to reactivate its economic activity, and we see how tied their economic activity is to Mexican production lines. Does this implies a risk for us, doesn't it? In terms of a resurgence of contagion in Mexico? And a second thing, the Mexican Institute for Social Security has told us that they're going to be monitoring companies in terms of their health measures that they're taking. And especially they're going to be monitoring what person can't go to work. What happens if they don't get leave? Pemex is saying that no, people can't have leave. Who is going to be monitoring Pemex? Who's going to be monitoring that they are giving people leave who are asking for it? Very important questions. I'll try to be brief. Let me be completely clear with absolutely no ambiguities. In Mexico and in any country of the whole world, in fact, in every single country of the whole world, there is a risk of a resurgence of COVID in the whole world. At the time that everybody goes back into public and mobility starts to ramp up, people are going back to malls, they're in parks, they're at schools, they're in all kinds of different places where there are big crowds, like recreational spaces, cultural, sports spaces, tourism spaces. There is the risk of resurgence. Why do I say this with so much emphasis? Because in every country, what they're experiencing is that they're unsure about their decisions. Nothing is guaranteed, nothing is written in stone. This is an emerging disease. We've never had a similar situation to this in 101 years in the whole world. So in 1918, 1919 was the Spanish flu pandemic. And then we also had H1N1 flu. And so now the whole world is experiencing this. There is no guarantee. And that's why every country is making decisions cautiously for a supervised, organized, and staggered return to a new normal, not to the normal we all know as being normal. No, let me be very clear. June 1st is not let's all go out and act like we did before. No, June 1st, when our national safe distancing campaign completes itself and it ends, we're going to have local municipal health authorities, state, federal, and they're going to be in constant communication with the federal government to know which municipalities and which states are going to have a different color on the stoplight: red, orange, yellow, and green. In this very clear way and very explicitly, this will show what levels of risk, pandemic risk, exist. And only those spaces that have the characteristics for being low risk, that's where we will open up activities in a staggered fashion. If we have an orange stoplight on, then that's moderate. Red, only essential activities can operate. And to finish this up, in terms of leave, e-stay is the person, is the organization who will be following up on leave. Every single person has the right to leave. Every worker has that, to take their leave. So I don't want anyone to be trampling that right. Thank you very much. It's 8:02. We will end tonight there. Thank you.
Can I talk now?